A great cover can sell a mediocre book. A mediocre cover may not sell the best book in the world. Like if your book is the next great American novel and you have a crappy cover, you're going nowhere, right? Word of mouth is not enough to overcome a bad cover.
Hello, folks, and welcome to Author Adjacent, a show about the journey from hobbyist writer to professional author. I'm your host, Michael Vadney, and today I am once again sitting with Andy Peloquin, author of 6 different series, from The Dark Blade to Cerberus. Welcome to the show, Andy. Welcome back.
Thank you for having me again.
Of course. Last week, we kind of just shot the shit and talked about whatever we wanted to, a little bit into your author journey, a lot into fight scenes, because, man, you're killing it on those. But this time, we wanted to explore a specific topic, that being the 4 crucial elements of successful book packaging. And the first thing I wanted to ask is, what are the 4 elements?
Well, do you want me to spoil the whole thing by giving you all 4? Or do you want me to do it like, real internet style? Here, the third one will shock you. How do you prefer this?
I have questions for all 4 of them. So why don't we start... Go in any order that you want, and I'll jump around with my questions for those. So you tell me, what is the first one?
So the first one is going to be cover. Cover is the most important part of your book packaging. It will do anywhere, and this is very anecdotal numbers, 70 to 80% of the heavy lifting for you. If you could run $100,000 worth of ads to an Amazon page, and the difference between making $100,000 worth of book sales and making $20,000 or $2,000 is really at the beginning your book cover, because it's the first thing that people see. How many times have you just picked up a book because the cover is awesome? Way too many times to count for me, right? And the cover, whoever said books, don't judge a book by its cover, it definitely was wrong, because we instinctively judge books by its cover. Now, when you look at a good cover, it will tell you exactly what to expect. A bad cover will not be clear. So the one thing that I know about book covers is that they need to have, especially for Amazon, they need to be clear in very, very small size, because for Amazon, you really only get that small product window. Unless people are actually on the product page, then it's a bit bigger, but it really has to be clear. And so you can tell that when, let's say, a good book cover gets really small, you can still see what it's all about. You can tell what's on the cover. You can see pretty much at a glance the story tone, right? So with Darkblade, I was very intentional with making Darkblade a cover that will last forever. So you know that because this guy is dark-haired and he's scowling, he's not a good guy. Heroes tend to smile, they tend to be blonde and brunettes, but anti-heroes, and this is something that is actually a thing, they tend to be darker. Then you've got swords, which is pretty clear violence. You've got some kind of magic here. You've got kind of a vague background, but that's really all you need to know, is that when you see it with the title, this dude is gonna have some kind of violence in there. So this is where a cover does so much of the heavy lifting. Now I'm trying to think of which of the books on my shelf has covers. I'm not gonna call any books out by saying covers that don't look good, but any cover that is not really, really clear about what the book is about, you're going to lose your audience. If it's not visually impactful, if it's not clear at a small size, you're going to lose your audience. Now, this doesn't necessarily matter if your name is Brandon Sanderson or if your name is Stephen King. If you are not those people, then you need to have the cover do the heavy lifting, because your name is effectively worthless until people know who you are, right? They start to follow you after they've read something that you like, that you've written that they like, right? After they follow you on social media and they say, oh, this guy might be a decent writer. But up until then, your name is worthless. Your cover is going to do all the hard work for you. So the most important element of book packaging is a really, really good cover. Do you have any questions on covers?
Yes, I do. And absolutely judge covers. That's what they're for, people.
Yes.
I also wanted to point out that, really selling the promise of your book by the cover is so important. I remember I was talking to Dirk Ashton he had a completely different kind of cover for his Paternus series originally, and he was showing me a copy of it, and it looks like a YA novel.
Yeah.
That's kind of like a mystery novel, which is very much not what Paternus is about. And his new series, like the new covers, are amazing. Yes. That
Look at this thing.
absolutely encapsulates.
This is
everything.
a piece of art that gives you everything you need to know about the story at a glance. You don't need to know anything other than magic spear, giant monster battles. That's it. Everything else, that's an amazing cover right there.
Yep. I love how ready you were with that one. But as far as like questions go, I actually wanted to ask you, how do you decide on the visual elements, the artist, the key imagery that signals this is a grim, character-driven fantasy without, one, spoiling the story, and two, just blending in with the thousands of other books?
Well, that comes down to the artist's skill and the artist that you choose. But even before you get to the character, you need to get to the style. So the kind of covers that exist right now are the insignia symbol covers, right? Every single romantasy ever, right? But there's also regular fantasy covers that have that. Then there are what I like to call graphic design covers, where even though you don't know what this book is about, the design elements are so pretty that you're like, oh, I'm in, right? You don't know what this book is about at a glance. You see some kind of lion-looking thing and some lines, but that cover is eye-catching as hell. Then you have a character cover, right? Where it is the character that does all the heavy lifting for you. Then you're going to have where are you? This is a Jeff Brown special, sort of a scene, right? This is a kind of cover that caters to a specific type of audience. It presents a specific type of mood, right? So each of these covers is a different kind of thing. A graphic design cover is more aimed at a traditionally published audience. So if your book reads a bit more, let's say more trad pub, right? Where it's a bit more high concept, where maybe it's a bit more cutting edge, a graphic design cover could look really, really good. But you need to have a designer who does really, really good work. Like, there is perfection in graphic design, and then anything less is just going to look bad to your brain in a way that you don't understand, but it just won't work. Whereas symbol covers, you can get away with that if you're romantasy, naturally. If you are a specific type of young adult, let's say like dystopian, right? Hunger Games, that's instantly symbol covers. But then even sort of some young adult series will get away with it. You can get away with it if maybe you're like a Circe or a Song of Achilles, right? There's like a symbol to it. But again, it's a very specific type of thing. A character cover works if you have a really visually compelling character that is very clear at a glance who they are, what they do, what about them is special. For a scene, you need to have not only a beautiful composition, but there also needs to be really good depth of color so you can tell foreground from background. You can tell all of that kind of stuff. Then there is the other one that is the classic weapon cover, right? Another really good example, actually probably the best example of this in modern fantasy is this guy right here, right? Malice sets itself apart by being this. It set the bar high for covers by having this piece of graphic design that's absolutely beautiful. So those are kind of the general kind of covers. And I'm going to say for fantasy, because fantasy is my realm of expertise. For sci-fi, you have sort of soldier on the front. You have spaceship. You have weird sci-fi scene. There's different covers for each genre. But really, for fantasy, which is what I know, those are the kind of 5 cover things. And you decide that based on whether you can actually set a really impactful scene that's visually appealing with that really good, easily visible depth of composition, like the Paternus cover, right? Paternus, dude fighting at night, big monster, moon, glowing spear, very, very impactful. It would not work as a character cover, whereas for Darkblade, if I tried to go with a scene, I would lose the impact of this really, really visually compelling character and the swords and all of that. So it comes down to, finding the cover that matches the book best. And the way that you do that is by looking at other books in the genre. You look at traditionally published books to see what they do that are most similar to yours tonally. And then you look at indie published books. And this is the key. Indie published books that are selling. Because you can find an indie book that is like, oh, that's exactly what it is. And then you look at their sales and they have sold nothing. What you want is to find a book that is selling, because that's what's telling people most clearly what it is that they're getting, and it's what they want. So it kind of comes to that whole mix of factors. And this is where cover design is so difficult and so important, because it's easier to get it wrong than it is to get right.
No, that makes sense. And that actually goes into my next question really well. What is the most common mistake you often see people make with their covers?
Forgetting that it needs to look good this big. In that product window on Amazon. If it does not look good at that size, if it's not clearly recognizable, it's just not going to sell, because that's where your Amazon ads are going to be showing. It's where you're going to get any kind of organic click-through with that also bought section. Like, if you want to have a chance of making it succeed on Amazon, you need a cover that shows up well on Amazon. Now, there is a new trend among indie authors of going Kickstarter first, or direct sales through their websites, promoting on TikTok and Instagram. That's a totally different ballgame. If you're going to go with Kickstarter first, you look at the covers that people are loving on Kickstarter, and you do that. You look at the covers of books that authors are succeeding with their direct sales on TikTok and Instagram, and you do covers that are similar or evocative of that. There's a bit more leeway with those two, but when it comes to Amazon first, you need to make a cover that shows up really, really well on Amazon.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of indie authors do rely on Amazon for their sales, especially with like Kindle Unlimited and stuff like that. Like, that's the way to go. I know it's not what everybody wants to hear sometimes, but that is the reality of the market currently. All right, let's move on to the next one then. Take it away, Andy.
The second one is the title. It's the title. I mean, look at this title. Dark Blade Assassin. Is there any question what this book is going to be about, right? Shadow Knights. Last Shadow Knights. Very, very clear what this is about. What the fuck is this book about? This book is banking on Tor. It's banking on Tor. It's banking on vibes. It's banking on the covers, but it doesn't do any of the heavy lifting by telling you, here's exactly what you're going to get. Now, you go here, The Faithful and the Fallen. It's not very, very clear, but Malice is a pretty great title. So whether you like it or not, this cover plus this title, I'm going to give it a shot. And then you get into it and you hear what The Faithful and the Fallen really are. And you're like, okay, very cool. Or Ryan Cahill's The Bound and the Broken. The Bound and the Broken is the perfect title because it evokes The Faithful and the Fallen. If The Faithful and the Fallen did not exist, The Bound and the Broken would not be the best title. But because of its existence, it does. It's kind of like why you go the blank of blank and blank, because Sarah J. Maas made that sequence of words really, really popular. If Sarah J. Maas never existed, it would not have been the same popularity that it is now. So you have to kind of understand that titles exist in these spaces with these other ones, but they also exist in a vacuum. If you were to write the grimmest, darkest epic fantasy and you named it the blank of blank and blank, well, you just fucked yourself over, because you promised a romantasy and you're delivering a grimdark. If you go the battle to save humanity and it's a cozy fantasy, well, yeah, you kind of deliver it against expectations. So you want to find the keywords, you want to find the title structure, you want to find the right combination of words that tell people exactly what they're getting as easily as possible. So The Last Shadow Knights is a very powerful title because it's the last. We all love that mystery. Ooh, why are they all dying? Who are they, right? Knight, powerful word. We've got that in mind, easily. And Shadow Knight. Oh, good guys gone dark. What is a Shadow Knight? I want to know. So this is a very powerful title right here. It's got knight, which is a word that shows up really well on Amazon. Shadow is a really powerful word, and the last is that evocation. One that I did for my military series is the Silent Champions. This title, The Last March, this is book 6 in the series, so it doesn't really matter what the title is. But book 1 is called Shields in Shadow. So you have shields, army, right? Shadow evokes not battlefield, but there's kind of the mystery, what's going on, why are there shadows? And then the silent champions, there's this question of, okay, they're champions, why are they silent? But all of those words, shields, shadow, silent, and champions, they're all good keywords on Amazon. So when you search for them, you have a good chance of coming up with some organic traffic. The second book in the series is called Battle for Peace. That's a question right there. Why? How battling for peace, right? Book 3 is Steel and Valor, right? Steel, Valor, both really powerful army words. So you're with every title, you're kind of leaning into the genre more and more. So for Assassin, the first book in the Darkblade series, instantly clear what you're getting. And then all of a sudden, book 2 is Protector. How did you go from Assassin to Protector? There's this question of how. And then book 3, Slayer. Okay, we're back to all the killing. And then Savior. Wait, what? There's this kind of forward and backward motion to the titles that kind of begs the question, the fuck is going on here? And so you're kind of drawn into the series more and more with each title. Whereas I don't know if there's going to be a Red City 2, but unless I really wanted to know what the Red City was about, I'm not really interested in a Red City. I'm interested in the cover, but there's nothing about Red City. Now, again, amazing book, don't get me wrong. But on that, so where it became really, really strong is the book itself was a really strong book. The marketing was really, really strong. The design, the cover did a lot of the heavy lifting, but the title falls a little bit flat compared to other titles. So this is one where you the Kindlepreneur, I believe is the name of the organization. Dave Chesson. Let me just Google that real fast. Knocking these books over. Kindlepreneur, like Kindle Entrepreneur. They have, Kindlepreneur. They have this KDP Rocket tool, and the KDP Rocket tool gives you a lot of keyword data, kind of like Google search analysis for keyword data. You can get keywords, but then you can also find like word clouds for each of the genres, not on Kindlepreneur, elsewhere. You can Google a lot of information and find like most common keywords for fantasy books or for military fantasy. There's a lot of resources that you can find with a bit of Googling. I don't know them all offhand, but you can find the most common words. So things like blade, sword, dagger, dark, these words, they're going to evoke certain mental images, and you just kind of put them together in the best way possible to get the title that works best. But a good title will tell you instantly what you're getting.
Ooh,
especially when paired with the cover.
Yeah, all these things have to work together, which I'm sure we'll talk more about later. But what process do you use for testing the marketability of these titles? Like, how do you balance the creativity with the clarity and the indie discoverability?
A lot of it is just talking with other authors about it, because these are people who are doing the exact same thing as I am, and they are having the exact same questions. So I'm like, hey, what do you think of this title or these title options? And we'll kind of bounce it around, or I'll run it past my beta readers or my readers. It's been a minute since I've had to think of a new title. Dragon Blood Assassin was the last one that I came up with, and that was like, what are the most keyword friendly words? And it was dragon and blood and then assassin. So I was like, yep, that's the title. That's the title of the series right there. Like, we wrote blood magic into it just so we could call it Dragon Blood Assassin, because it was a super keyword friendly title. So things like that, they often go into the creation of the story, especially if you can kind of think of these things ahead of time. Now, that being said, not all titles need to be so straightforward. So a really good example of this is Dungeon Crawler Carl. Dungeon Crawler Carl the titles on their own convey this book is a little bit different, right? The Butcher's Masquerade. What even is that? But when you hear that, you're like, okay, interesting. There is a series that I'm working on that is coming out in the next year or so, and the titles are a bit of a risk, but the titles, they're based on an existing IP that's kind of this comedic thing. So by leaning into the comedy of it all, like the dungeon crawler Carl flavor, it says, this is not your classic fantasy book that has words like sword and shade and shadow and blood and all of that. It's something a little bit different, but it's familiar enough that you can kind of get a sense of what it is. So I don't know if these titles are going to work. It's an experiment, but I know the titles that I have chosen for all of my series, like Queen of Thieves. Queen of Thieves is an immediately clear title. Whatever this story is going to be, it's going to be about a badass thief, right? And you go Child of the Night Guild, Kid, Thief of the Night Guild. Whatever the Night Guild is doesn't really matter. It's kind of a cool fantasy bullshit thing, but Child and Queen of Thieves, it's really, really clear what the story is. So doing things like that to make sure that everything is clear across the series and individual book titles, using keywords and pairing it with that cover. Because when you look at this, it's called Malice, the Faithful and the Fallen, Book 1. Not really clear what it is. You look at this, it says Darkblade, Assassin. This is instantly clear. You don't need to know anything else about this book to know, yeah, this dude's going to kill a lot of people.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. When I think of titles that I really enjoy too, it's like this dichotomy of like, I like the short, punchy titles, and then I really like the longer, unique ones. The ones that like really point out to me or really stick out to me right now is James Islington. Both his Lycanius trilogy and his Hierarchy trilogy have immensely unique and long titles.
Yes.
And I feel like he's a standout example of breaking the mold in a way that works.
So I will say The Shadow of What Was Lost works in a very Shakespearean way, in the sense of we're almost giving you this beautiful experience through the title. And so paired with that cover, you're like, this is a different kind of fantasy, which it almost wasn't in a way. So the title almost works against it. The title is almost too beautiful for the book. Again, no criticism of James Islington, but pairing that title, The Shadow of What Was Lost, do you really think of that kind of beauty in the book? Whereas
that is a good point.
The spear cuts through water. What the fuck does that mean? Right? What does the spear cuts through water mean? But when you read the book and you get into the poetic style and you see everything that's actually going on, you're like, oh, I get it now, right? And so The Shadow of What Was Lost, on the face of it, beautiful title. The cover, one of the greatest fantasy covers, kind of like Malice, stand out in every way. But is it the right title for the book? I don't know. I will say that it's not the most on brand.
That's a good point.
Whereas The Will of the Many... I would
agree with you on that. Sorry, go ahead.
The Will of the Many makes no real sense until you crack open the book, and then it makes perfect sense, right? And this is where the title alone and the cover alone would not have sold the book. James Islington's name sold the book. Saga Press sold the book, but on its own, and this is where indie authors need to sort of understand we are different than traditionally published authors. This book is not going to sell based on our name recognition. We have to have the cover and the title and all the other things do the heavy lifting. A really good example of a cover that just kind of works with the title.
Yeah.
Right? This cover is visually compelling as hell. We see Japan, and then when you read the Book of Fallen Leaves, I mean, I don't know about you, but I just thought of Uncle Iroh, right? That one
100%.
scene, right? And so by doing it like this, he evoked, or the good people who designed this in Orbit, they evoked Uncle Iroh, whether it's accurate or not, but we were immediately cast into feudal Japan, Avatar-y kind of thing, and we all want to be there. So this is a really good example of Great cover paired with a title that's a little bit different, but by being different, you tell us exactly what to expect. Because I haven't read it yet, so I don't know if it lives up to it, though.
I know. I've been seeing that cover all over the place, and every time I see it, I'm just like, God damn, that's good. I want to read that.
But that's a graphic design cover. It looks like a character cover, but it's a graphic design cover because of the perfect circle in exactly the right location, the spokes, the thing going through. Like a graphic designer will tell you all the ways that this is perfect, and you don't know anything about this character except that he's in a suit of armor, right? So this is where a graphic design cover masquerading as a character cover has so much power. And that's the same thing with Malice. Malice is as a graphic design cover masquerading as a weapon cover. And most weapon covers kind of masquerade. Or sorry, most of them are graphic design covers, but just with weapons as the element. But
well,
I wanted to be very clear.
Sense.
I know very little about actual graphic design and art, but what I do know is I can tell you when a cover works and when it doesn't work, and I just kind of have to work backward and say, why doesn't this work?
No worries. I'm getting a master class here. Like, I'm learning so much. I almost want to take my cover and my title and everything and be like, Andy, please rip it apart.
I'm instantly in.
We'll get together later.
Yeah. So that was 2. Are you ready for moving on?
I'm ready for moving on, yes.
Okay. So number 3 is the blurb. The blurb, I'm going to say the blurb is a little bit, is actually less important and more important, depending on who the reader is. I do not read blurbs. Andy, the reader. I don't read blurbs because I don't want to get that, when his parents mysteriously die in a fire, I don't want to have that spoiled. I want to have that moment happen to me in real time. I don't read blurbs. Now, that is me. The way that I go about buying books is very different than the way that your average Amazon reader goes about buying books. So when they land on your page, they're going to see that gorgeous cover. They're going to see the title, and it's going to be repeated up here. And then they're going to immediately go down and see what that blurb is, see what it's about. Some people will buy it based on the strength of its title alone. But that blurb does just one more piece. It convinces them to take the next step, which is the 4th and final pillar that we'll get to. But a well-crafted blurb gives, just enough without giving away too much. And I will give you an example of a blurb that I actually found a little disappointing while the book is phenomenal, which is The Shadow of the Gods. The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, all it does is says, effectively, here's an epic story. Now, the book sells because it's John Gwynne, because the cover is amazing, because it's Shadow of the Gods, because everything else is working for it. But that blurb, if you go read that blurb, you know nothing about the actual story itself. You know only about the stakes. You know that the gods are coming back and the world's going to be destroyed. That's it. You don't know who the characters are, aside from a little bit about them. I think there's 1 sentence per character, but you don't know enough about them. Now, a really, really good blurb tells you enough to give you a really solid connection to the character. It gives you a sense of the tone. It gives you a sense of everything that's really important. And I think I'm going to have to refer you back to Dungeon Crawler Carl. Let me go look up the Dungeon Crawler Carl blurb, because the fact that the apocalypse will be televised, that right there is one of the greatest lines ever. And then a man, his ex-girlfriend's cat, so much heavy lifting in those 2 little phrases, and then a sadistic game show, unlike anything in the universe, a dungeon crawl where survival depends on killing your prey in the most entertaining way possible. Read the whole Dungeon Crawler Carl, if you're watching this, read the whole Dungeon Crawler Carl blurb. It's a little long, but it is a story in and of itself, and it gives you a sense of the kind of tongue-in-cheek humor, the absurdity of this thing. But just that opening line of the apocalypse will be televised, that line has so much power. And so you want to get a blurb like that. This is a pretty solid one. Honor, sacrifice, vengeance, right here. That's just a little stinger, but that's got some power to it. You get a good blurb will have this staying power. It will catch your attention with something. Either here is exactly what you're expecting from this cover and title, and here's why you're going to love it, or here is what you're not expecting, or here's what you're super interested about, and here's why you're going to love it. That's what the blurb is. It's a chance for you to say, this book is either exactly what it looks like, or because you don't know what it looks like, here's what I'm going to deliver. So I'm pretty sure the Red City blurb is actually fairly strong. It's a fairly strong blurb because I believe, so it says, when you win the game of power, who do you lose? And that is a powerful thing because that speaks to who the characters are. Both of them, they want to gain power, and they're willing to basically sacrifice everybody to do it. And so just with that little line, it's got a bit of power, and it tells you what the story is about. That it's not about whatever the fuck this city is, regardless of its color. It's about the people. And so it kind of draws you in that sense. So the blurb, I'm going to say a good blurb does maybe 5 to 10% of your heavy lifting, but when you pair it with the cover and the title, you've got them hooked, and they want to know more, and that leads them to the fourth step. Do you have questions about step 3 before we move on to 4?
No, you did so good on that one. You answered my questions before I answered them. So
hell yeah.
Let's move on to step 4.
All right, and now step 4 will shock you. Now, step 4 is the first chapter or two, the look inside. When you have a good chapter 1 and chapter 2, because, people read the first 10% of the book, typically. That's how much you have access to. When you have a good chapter 1 and 2, that is the difference between the buy or the not. And so I will tell you, a bad chapter 1 is if you start with setting, if you start with the stars were out and who gives a shit. If you start with a tavern, you're probably going to lose a lot of people because so many books start in taverns, and that's too cliche, right? If you start with something really interesting and compelling, then you're going to be interested. So for the beginning of Darkblade, I basically read Night Angel. Night Angel has one of my favorite openings where the assassin character climbs up inside a toilet to murder his people. And I was like, okay, regardless of everything else that just happens, he's climbing up through shit to murder somebody. That tells me so much about what this story is going to be right there. So when I open the line with dead men lurked in ambush for the hunter of Baramis, there's a lot of heavy lifting done in that one sentence there. Is it the perfect sentence? Who knows? It's the sentence I went with. But dead men, lurk, ambush, port, right? There's a certain sense of the lurking conveys there's some kind of malicious intent. There's some action coming up. The hunter, who is this guy? What's going on? Dead men. Are they actually dead? Is this necromancy? What's going on here? And then you go to the kind of the next steps. But you have that chapter, that opening chapter that just draws you in, and you gives you a good sense of who the character is, what makes them both badass and human. I actually do a whole presentation on good opening chapters. Not that I'm going to say, all my chapters are great, but I know what makes a good opening chapter because I get requests to read books pretty much daily, and I say, send me the first chapter. And whether or not the first chapter hooks me, that will usually decide whether I read the book or not. So even though I don't read blurbs and I look at covers and I don't care about the titles, the combination of the cover and that first chapter is, for me, doing all of the heavy lifting. Now, there are books like the Book of Fallen Leaves, where the cover, the tone, all of that, I haven't read a single word of it, and I know that I have to give it a try because it's very much up my alley as a reader. It fits my mood. But if I knew nothing else about it, and I looked at that opening chapter, if it was a boring opening chapter, I'd be out, no matter how beautiful the cover is. Whereas if that opening chapter is good enough to keep me engaged, then I'm in. So in Silent Champions, the opening chapter is an ambush that kills everybody. That right there, whoever you are, if you were hoping, this captain's going to be marching with his favorite soldiers and they all die, okay, now what? Where does the story go from here, right? You don't typically start off with everybody that you know dying on the first page. With Darkblade, it's a chapter where he just rips through people. You get to see that he's actually kind of unkillable. You get to see what people think about him. You get to see him in action. You get to see him actually murder somebody, which not a lot of assassin books do for some odd reason. But there's so much delivered in the first chapter that if you get through that first chapter and you're like, okay, I'm kind of here for a murder book, then you're more likely to actually go and buy and read the rest of the book. If you're like, you know what, this book has way too much murder for me, well, I made sure that from the beginning you know what you're getting and there's no unmet expectations. So A good book will show you right from the beginning who the character is and what the tone overall of the world is. And this is where I don't know if the end of Dungeon Crawler Crawl Chapter 1 starts with everything being destroyed and then this way into the dungeons. I don't remember if that's the end of Chapter 1 or partway through Chapter 2, but it's early on in the book enough that when you get there, you're like, what the fuck is going on? Why did everybody die? And what is down these stairs, right? So this is a really strong opening chapter that if you can get through everything that just happened, you're in to find out more. And then you're in to find out more. And by that point, you're hooked.
Wow, you're just like really knowledgeable on this. Like you really have like your finger on the pulse of the marketing of how this all works together.
Well, I've had to do it. I've had to do it 45 times.
That is fair. You better be good at it at this time.
Or at least not absolute rubbish, right?
That is true. So, man. All right. So when you're talking about the look inside, is it only about the words or does the interior design make a big difference? Or is it just typically what is the actual story?
I mean, when you read a book and you see those really cool looking chapter headings, do they matter to you?
I feel like they're like candy. They're nice
candy.
To have, but
Exactly.
not required.
Exactly. You can do that. You can go as flowery and fancy as you want. But if the first thing that the person experiences of your book, which is the words, doesn't work, then no candy is going to make it worth it.
That's valid. That's very fair. Okay.
So consider all that stuff window dressing. You can dress the fuck out of those windows, but if they're dirty or cracked, then the windows just don't serve any purpose.
Yeah, it's just not going to matter then. Okay, so looking at it as like overall as a holistic experience then, in your experience, how do these four elements interact with each other? Like can a strong cover a weak title? Can the first chapter do enough to cover everything else? Are there different ones that you should really make sure that you nail first and then secondary the others?
So 100% your cover, give your cover all of the love, right? The cover, a great cover can sell a mediocre book. A mediocre cover may not sell the best book in the world. Like if your book is the next great American novel and you have a crappy cover, you're going nowhere, right? Word of mouth is not enough to overcome a bad cover. Like it's very, very rare that a popular book has an actually bad cover. There's some with some mediocre covers where because, the book blew up on social media, people are reading it. But 9 times out of 10, there's a recover coming, right? Where it's pretty, where it's made pretty, where it looks good on shelves. And this is what happens every single time. It's why Dungeon Crawler Carl got new covers. The original covers were awesome, but when there was all this interest, they were like, well, let's give us a really, really great looking cover. And that cover is super eye-catching. So I divide it basically 70 to 80% of your heavy lifting is done by the cover. Another 5 to 10% each by the blurb and the title. And then that clincher, that last 10% is going to be your look inside. Without the cover, you're never getting them past that stage. So let's say you run a Facebook ad and you use some image that you found anywhere on the internet, right? Their first experience when they land on your page is a cover. That's the first thing they're going to see. If it's no good, they're out. If it's good, they're going to see the other element on the cover, which is your title. Your name means nothing. Your name is useless right now. The title, the series and book title. Do they care when you combine those two? But then remember that that's an ad. There's going to be organic search traffic, which is brought from the title, the keyword title. So those are two different ways that people are going to get to your page. So you want to make sure that the title is very clear. Like if you looked for, like Book of Fallen Leaves is not a strong title to search for on Amazon in terms of actual, search volume. It would be like Samurai Sword Killer, powerful title, but it's not the story, but so it doesn't matter. But the Book of Fallen Leaves is not a keyword heavy title. It's a very vibe title, which is perfect because it's traditionally published. For indies, we got to think about keywords. So keywords have to match the story, the cover, and it's also got to attract organic traffic from Amazon itself. So those two things are basically doing the immediate heavy lifting, because you cannot see the cover without the title, right? And then when you are interested enough, you're either going to see the blurb or you're going to go straight to the look inside, depending on who you are. But that final piece of the puzzle is coming from the look inside. Nobody or very few people are going to buy based on the strength of the blurb alone, because they have the look inside. They have it right there. Amazon put it there so they can use it. And I don't think there are many people who buy a book without using it. So they're going to look at that look inside. And if it's not strong, then you are going to lose them based on just the fact that your book didn't have an interesting enough opening to convert them when the cover compelled them to click the look inside.
Yeah. So it sounds like the inside is really the closer of your deal. If you don't
100%.
get that sale immediately from the cover, then you need that strong inside.
Yep, 100%. And the truth is that you almost never get the sale immediately from the cover. Like, no, very, very few people are actually going to spend hard-earned money on cover alone. You're going to spend it based on recommendations from other people that you trust. You're going to get it based on the blurb. You're going to get it based on the look inside. You may like the vibes of the cover, but it's very, very rare that you'll be like, I know nothing about this author. I know nothing about this story, and I'm still going to spend $30 of my hard-earned money on this book just because the cover's pretty. We can buy art for that. There's enough pretty books as it is. So you want to make sure that it is the lowest barrier to entry by making all four of those packaging elements as strong as possible.
Wow. Okay. So we are nearing the end of our episode, but I did have one more question to kind of encapsulate all that we've talked about today, because this has been immensely helpful. So for aspiring and honestly mid-career indie authors as well, what's your top piece of advice on investing in or iterating on these packaging elements to go from like hobbyist sales to consistent professional results?
So the cover, what I think I said it before, make sure that your cover is similar to what is selling in terms of both traditionally published books, because there is a finer margin now between indie and trad, thanks to social media kind of being more indie friendly and indie forward. So if you have an indie book that looks visibly like a trad book, there's a chance it could sell. Because other people are looking for trad. But if you find a book that looks like another indie book that is selling, then you have a much better chance of hitting the same indie reading audience, which is like the Kindle Unlimited audience and all of that. Now, if you're going to go for Kickstarter, look at the books that are selling on Kickstarter, not necessarily based on the strength entirely of the author and their platform, but on the strength of the art, both internal and external. If you're doing it on social media, look at the people who are selling on social media and the way that their books look and all of that. Like basically make your book similar to while distinct from whatever is selling, because that's when you will get that instant recognition. So for this one, anybody who sees this either calls it a ripoff of Artemis and Trary or Night Angel, like without fail. And I'm like, okay, that's exactly what I intended to do. I mean, ripoff is the wrong word for it, but you look at this and you think one of those two. So that's the job of the cover, is to say, if you liked Night Angel or if you immediately think of Artemis and Trary, this book is going to give you that. And then all the things that you get with the look inside, with the cover and the blurb, or the keywords in the blurb, it convinces you that you're a Night Angel fan, this is the book for you, without me ever having to use the word Night Angel. I just have to say this is similar enough looking, sounding, and feeling like with the inside, the look inside, that you're going to get a Night Angel-esque adventure. And this is the power of indies, is that we don't have to be entirely different. We can actually be very, very similar, and people want more of that. With traditionally publishing, they're like, oh, it needs to be very, very different because it's got to stand out and be unique. As indies, we fill the spaces between the, let's call it the big tent poles of these different books. We give people more of what they want, and they love us.
I love that. I love how wholesome you just turned that. That was amazing. All right. Andy, can you tell the people, where can they find you? Where can they find your books?
Yeah, so you can find me on my website, andypeloquin.com. All of my books are available there as shelf trophies. I'm also hanging out a lot on Instagram and TikTok as Andy Peloquin Author. So those are probably the best places to find me.
Absolutely excellent. Thank you again for coming onto the show for this week and last week. God, I feel like I've learned so much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. I will definitely be happy to blast your cover and title to shit. No, I am all about the positivity. So I will offer all the constructive and suggestions that I can.
I greatly appreciate that. And folks, until next time, let's be author adjacent together. See ya. Oh man, these are really good episodes.
I'm so glad that they're proving helpful.